can just to make sure. Okay, cool. Right on, right on. We should be good, I think.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm really excited, dude. I don't get to stream often with other people, so I mean, for the same reason that like you get to get when you game with people. Okay, cool. Okay. That's okay. It's storming over here really bad. Or it's about to. It's shit. Yeah. So the power went out yesterday, so I'm like, oof. Okay. But it's gonna be back. I've been here every Wednesday leading up to the album release, so it's been really cool to kind of give more context to the songs as they come out and show you how I made them. And this case is no different because I don't know. It's cool because it was a way to connect with not just you, Zeal, but like with acrylics and like knowing how much I like wanted to be on Mad Zoo or like wanted to do stuff with you guys. Like these projects are the first time that I'm actually getting to do that, and I think that's really cool. That like for as long as we've known each other, so yeah. So yeah, everybody. I'm gonna introduce my homie Zeal, who that's the internet. That's not the right thing. Hold on. Let me not just show my my
Yeah. That was a long time ago too. That feels like it's light years ago. It was the Mad Zoo. Why do I forget what it's even called? But like, it's like the Mad Zoo like second big compilation or whatever. It's actually hilarious how that happened. Yeah, Croatia was on there. There was some big name Rohan. That's how like kind of Rohan like got into the scene. I remember hearing his tune and being like, "Yo, that is some fire." 100%. Yeah. It's been such a fun experience. Like we started this.
yeah.
Oh man, this is like at least a year old when we first started this. I would say this track, and I remember like you sent it over to me, and I was like, "Hey, this is super fun and exciting." And I've never really worked with a producer vocalist like yourself before, so this is like a super cool experience to like get to sit down and work like my skill set into a song that you already had so like well like so what's the word I'm looking for? It was so like prepared and already so professional that I was like,
Yeah.
oh shit, what do I do here? Like this is so good already. And then like not having to like deal with like vocals myself because like you absolutely destroy it on the mic and your processing and everything is so good. Like everyone's always like, oh my God, like her voice is so good. How did you work with her? And I'm just like, honestly, like I didn't do a whole lot when it came to her voice. Like that was all her. I didn't do anything. Like I was very lucky in that sense. It was just like so much fun to get to play around and just focus on adding some fun stuff to the track, you know, and getting that like kind of D&B flair to it.
I appreciate that a lot. Guys, let me know if the vocal works now. Apparently I was having issues with the setup that I had before. So let me know if it's working now. That sucks because I just did this whole introduction just completely quiet, I guess. I don't know. We'll find out. That's unfortunate, but okay,
Just
so
bump the volume up a bit.
yeah, I mean, we should be good now. Hopefully, I see a signal from Ableton now, so we should be fine. But yeah, so but to your point, cool, perfect. I'm so sorry about that, guys. But to your point, one thing that I get really self-conscious about, because like, I mean, I appreciate the kindness, I guess, but at the same time, at least from where I'm coming from, I feel like I have to, when I share an idea with somebody or if I want to collaborate, I feel like as much of the intent has to be there as possible. Like,
yeah,
it has to, the whole energy and like vibe and everything has to kind of be seen and portrayed there already. So like by the time you get there, it's like
100%.
you know exactly what to do, or like you can, there's things that you can pick apart about it and improve, but the vibe is there, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And
100%. Yeah, I agree fully.
yeah. So I like, especially with this, where like drum and bass is something that I'm like, I listen to all the time, but it's never something that I really try to make first. Considering how often I make breaks, I don't dabble in drum and bass nearly as much, just because it's hard to finish. I like making it, but I never finish tracks, you know. And
yeah, 100%.
Yeah, so I think something that was reassuring with you and acrylics is like I had these ideas, but I think by sending them to you guys, it was like it kind of like it just added the icing to the cake. You guys like helped glue the songs together and give them a lot more body and depth. It's like doing synth layering that I just straight up have no concept of. So yeah. But we'll get into
I
that.
disagree, but you know,
I
think you're great at it.
I'm trying. Like, I think I'm learning a lot more lately about how to stack things and when it's even necessary. Because I feel like when growing up, we were like told to like layer as many transients as possible and get things like just really like thick and like a lot of top end. And I'm like, I feel like that's just not always necessary anymore, or like to get the point across. But yeah, I guess we can kind of dig into this song. I guess I mentioned this to Zeal earlier today, but one funny thing about this song is that this is like the second rendition of it. Like I sent it to him, we started working on it on Splice, and then I was staying at Matt's house for a bit, and I redid all the vocals at his house because he has a bunch of preamps and stuff and nice mics, and so I used all his gear to like record the vocals and stuff and get a few more synths going and the mix because the monitors in there are great. So I just like I did a lot of work on the song while I was there, and for some reason did not think to like I guess I didn't properly save it on the cloud like I thought I did, which is like a dumb move anyways, but Matt had accidentally deleted this song and the opening track on the album, like just deleted the whole project file. And he called me one day and he's like, hey, like, was there anything in here that you needed? And I was like, I left that folder it was ideas for you if you wanted to use them. And then, but then I realized it was like two of my songs and I was like, yo, shit. So I had to redo one from the start. Submerge had to be redone completely, but then Zeal helped me kind of patch together this one. Which I think we did end up going, like I have it labeled to where it's like we ended up going with a lot of your stuff, and it has a lot of your the song titles have your like everything in parentheses where you have like a whole sentence. Like this is from the Salvation that you had to do. It's like chord stack. You might already have this one.
Yeah, I can't even imagine the process when it comes to like doing the vocals. Like I've never sang. I'd like to at some point, but like the different takes and stuff is just like, I haven't done a lot of vocal recording either. So like, I can't even imagine like the time and effort that goes into that. Like on a professional level.
I mean, it's fun. I think just like with anything else in production, you find a workflow. And then once you like lock into it, you're really locked into it. Like once you get into what you're doing, it's really hard to stop. And that's how I get with like stacking vocals. Like all this stuff is just from it's, and a lot of it comes from like, because I'm not a huge sound designer. Like I don't make a lot of it's not that I don't know, I just have a harder time coming up with synth ideas and stuff like that, so I try to accommodate to it with my voice. But anyways, with that being said, we can get into it.
Let's do it.
So I know an original influence of this was actually a K-Motion's song. So I was trying to go for some Liquid D&B for the most part.
Oh. Yeah.
Which
big ups K-Motion. He's
awesome.
Yeah,
he's fantastic. So that's kind of where the things, got to be careful with soloing things. But that's where this came from here. Yeah, I just like that. I wanted to do something super like jazzy, and easy to riff on, like something that I would normally play on a guitar, I guess. And luckily a lot of Liquid drum and bass, it uses a lot of like jazz chords and stuff. So I was like, oh, that's familiar. And I'm guessing, yeah, that's you saving me. But I ended up, I realized like there was times where you would send me a stem and I would just like pan them. Like in this case, I just pan them left and right because there was like a slight difference in the tonality. 100%. And because I automated one side a little bit different too. One's like EQ'd in. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so it started with those chords for the most part. And the vocal, I feel like that I should have started from the top. I didn't want to just like get into the vocals immediately. So aside from that, there's this art that Zeal created from Spire. This guy.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah. If you want to, do you know where that came from? Do you know what happened?
It's the one underneath the bass there. Our projects are like probably different because it's grown so much since we started.
Yeah,
but
give me 1 second.
I do believe it's this one right here. I don't get sadly we couldn't get the audio to work through, so we're gonna have to kind of roll with the punches on no audio. But like I'm just like can pull up the patch and stuff here.
You're all good.
Can they see that all right?
Yeah, they can see it. Like and like I said, it's
dope.
Yeah, I just have the sound.
There you go. Yeah, I saw the switch there. Yeah, sweet. So like I am a firm advocate of Spire. It's like this it's the synth I started using like when I almost started producing, like after like learned like Massive way back in the day, and that was kind of like the beginning of my synthesizing journey, I guess you could say. And then I found Spire, and I pretty much use this synth for like 80% of my sounds in like everything.
Yeah.
For the sake of this track, like it's so good at like really nice like melodic plucks and pads and atmospheres and all that kind of stuff. And that's where I like love it the most, because all my tunes like somehow just become super atmospheric, and I just love like the like blanket that it puts over top of a song, like and it's got this kind of like very airy texture to it. Yeah. But yeah, like this patch is just literally like in my user library. Like I probably went through and picked a preset that I liked, and then I just manipulate them. And it's like, so most of these sounds that I make for like songs like this, like even my own songs, are so simple. Like my chain at the bottom, like I literally have no processing on it, just like very small internal processing, like a phaser, shaper, bit of delay, bit of reverb, like all super low on the dry wet, like really not touching too much. The phaser's pretty high on this one just to get like the movement and like the space to it, but like
you can definitely hear that.
For the most part, like these plucks are 100%. And then just like a filter, just like standard like filter going into it and stuff like that to give it the motion that it's like increasing. But like so one single oscillator, and it's like the most classic waveform, so it's like just a sine. It's just like such a simple patch, and like a lot of people underestimate the power of we were actually talking about this, O and I, like before we jumped onto the stream here, and it was just like the power of like something so simple that can, if it sits in the mix right and sits in the tune right, it almost sounds like it's this like super intricate piece, but it's really not when you break it down. Like you go through it and you're just like, wow, that's actually like the easiest patch ever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just sometimes that's just how it works. Like
I've noticed that especially when I
and then,
listen
like-
to like when I listen to stems from like rock bands, and you hear how thin the guitars will sound, or like how thin each instrument by itself sounds, and then it's like, how in the world did that work? And then all together you're like, okay, because everything needed its place. So
Yeah, exactly. It's something that like you were talking about like just before, was like how when we like grew up, like, and we were learning to produce, it's just kind of like put as much as you can into it, like stack as many sounds as possible, try and fill this space, because like you don't really know how it works. But
Yeah.
then like as you progress as an artist, you start to realize that like less is more.
yeah,
And
no,
that
for
was
real.
kind of like a phrase that like one of my old seriously, one of my old mentors used to tell me that, and it was just like less is more, and you like don't really understand it until like one day you have this like epiphany and it like clicks and you're like, oh my god, I don't need 7 sounds here, I need like one that I put in the forefront and maybe like a backing sound or two, and that's it.
And that's usually,
That's why a lot of
yeah,
these track breakdowns now like are so simple a lot of the time, and it like makes you like, it really puts into perspective like it's so achievable for anyone who's producing, especially like the brand new producer who's been producing for, you know, a year or like 6 months or something, and it's like super daunting. Like it's actually super simple. Like don't be afraid to just jump in, grab a preset, mess around with it,
yeah, no,
and then
for real.
you could just have like the entirety of your song right there. Like
Yeah.
so.
And like what's good is that that mindset doesn't mean you can't experiment, or that you shouldn't throw a lot of paint on the wall. Like if anything, like in the initial writing stages, you can come up with as many ideas as possible. That's the goal. But then you can always, like, once you're actually trying to build your arrangement and build the composition, then you can strip things back again, and like you said, decide what is actually the focal point. One thing that Matt would always tell me with mixing, which I never understood entirely because I don't draw, but like when you look at a painting, there's a focal point of that picture, and you have to decide like what that is in the song. Like what is the focal point of the song at any given moment, and what is the like background noise, or what should just be taken away entirely. And like if you can think of your mixes in that sense, then it's just a little bit easier. But yeah, and like even with these plucks, what's cool is because the chords are super thick and lush. They kind of take up a good chunk of low end, and so the arps, you didn't need to mix a lot because they're holding a different space as it is.
Exactly.
So
yeah, and that's another important point actually, thanks for bringing that up, is like just filling out spaces of the frequency spectrum as opposed to like adding things that are going to fight with each other. So like all of these like plucks are like filling, like, yeah, exactly what you said, like the mid to high range, like, and not even dipping too far into the mid range. And then like the chords are very low, lush, like embracing chords that just kind of, they just wrap around like the low end of the track.
the pads on here, actually, you know, instead of trying to solo stuff, you know, it'd be even smarter to just turn shit off. I'm like, I could just turn off everything. So much. Okay. But yeah, going off that point, like all the chords, all the arps, even the pads, they're all occupying, all the pads and stuff, they're really, all the low ends taken out for the most part. Or they're very airy in comparison. They're lacking any depth.
Yeah.
Like they're really flat, and they lack dynamic
100%.
in comparison to the chords, which are like right up in your face, or the arps that are like, you feel the pluck happening, and it's like right up in your face.
Exactly.
So it's
exactly.
I was just telling someone this the other day, that it's important to think of your mix as like in a 3-dimensional space, and like not just from left and right, but like how close something feels to you, especially when you're talking about vocals and drums. That's a really, really fast way to get the mix sounding like fantastic. So I guess moving to these pads, they're bounced down, but for the most part, most of my pads come from either my voice, a granulator, or like the Analog Dreams like pads from Native Instruments. Like I use 3 things and that's it.
Don't be. Hey, you can switch it back to your screen if you're going over some of the vocal stuff.
Okay.
I just see it's still on mine.
Oh, you're good.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I don't have the
So, like, for example, all the atmospheres, like I said, they're just like really airy. Maybe using like, oh, here we go. Yeah, just sampler. There's a NASA satellite in here. There we go. Granulator. That's literally all I use. I typically just use granulator. And then just like throw my voice into it, or I find like an effect, like an atmosphere that's already in Splice, and I'll throw that into granulator and stretch it out even more. So it's really not that deep. I guess it would be good to go into the vocals because it does carry a lot aside from the like chord progression. The lead vocals I doubled and kept it super simple. I can let the waves go by. The only thing like just tell me what you're trying to imply. The only thing really going on is like a little bit of saturation. I probably would have done more going. In fact, one thing I would have done a lot more saturation to this song in general. Looking back, like looking back on the mix, I probably would have just like slammed things so much harder. But but yeah, for this, I was pretty tame with it, and just did like a bit of tube saturation. I always use Ableton's pedal, like always on everything, but especially my voice. A little bit of EQ where it typically needs it just because of the mic that I use. And then I automated reverb and delay. I typically nowadays I don't do it like this where I just throw it right on the track. I try to use sends now so that I can like compress them and stuff. But yeah. David, yeah, I do tune the atmospheres. What's really cool, it's something that I stole from a Dead Mouse masterclass where I'll actually start my song with drones if I'm real stuck. Try and come up with a lot of really beautiful atmospheres and like get all like spiritual and light some candles and stuff, and then try to write from there. And that decides the key of your song, and you can't really stray away from that. Yeah, it sets a healthy boundary.
I feel that for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's nice because it can kind of like help you in like multiple directions, because it's like you're not really like following I want to do this, because like the drone just kind of like sits there and you're like, oh, I have this idea, now I have this idea. It's cool. That's a great pro tip right there.
Drums are fun, but drums don't have any identity until you add music to it, and it's easy to get stuck if you start with drums. So but yeah, so just Agreed. I guess jumping back to the vocals, I kept it very simple. The backing vocals are actually doing most of the work in this song, to be honest. Like over here, and I doubled everything and pan, like, so the lead vocals I don't pan any more than like maybe 10 or 15 left and right, and then I'll do a slight like millisecond delay on one of them, just like I would with guitars or synths. But like I said, the backing vocals carry so much, it's kind of stupid. So I have like, I do my lows. My lows are, one thing that's interesting here is that I spread them out as wide as I do, because I typically, like the lower in my range that I'm singing, the closer to mono that I try to keep it. And then like the higher in my range I go, the more I spread it out. Usually. But yeah, I just didn't do that in this case for some reason. And another thing that I try to do is be a little more heavy-handed with the EQ and compression with the backing vocals. Like it goes back to what we were saying earlier about the art piece, where like The focal point would be my lead vocal, so there's not a ton of compression squashing it down versus the backing vocals where the less I want them to be perceived but felt, the more I'll like squash it with a glue compressor or something. But yeah, so the main thing
fun to experiment. It's fun to experiment with those backing vocals too. You can get some cool like little artifacts and stuff like that you wouldn't get from putting it in like the front.
Yeah, no, for real. Like the way my house is literally shaking from thunder right now. If you're wondering why my face keeps going like, what is going on? It's because my house is shaking from thunder, and it's scary. It's freaking me out.
I think we should answer this question from Krug super quick. I like this one. Not to get off a tangent, but he says, speaking of looking back, how do each of you know when you're done with a song? The urge to tweak forever seems real strong. Sadly, you kind of don't ever feel done with a song. Dude, like that's a reality that you face forever. And like O said, she's like, honestly, looking back, like I would probably add more saturation.
No, I'm still
to your songs when they're like done.
Yeah, there's so many. Every time I do these track breakdowns, I'm like roasting the hell out of these songs. I'm like, dude, there's so much that I could change right now.
Like, why didn't I do this? Why didn't I do that?
I've noticed a lot of my musical conversations lately with my peers, where they're like, hey, I'm feeling like this, where it's like loneliness or like fear of the unknown or like, how do I know things are done? How do I feel certain? I'm like, that feeling will never go away. You just have to learn to hold hands with it. Yeah. You just have to learn to like be present with it, because it usually means
so never feel like if you're always feel like the perfectionist side of you is going to stay forever, sadly. So just embrace it.
It's a good thing. It just means you care. That's all.
Yeah,
you just
100%
care.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was just going to say. It means you care and you're passionate about it, and just learn to handle it. And there's going to be days and times where you're like, I'm useless. I can't do anything, but you can. It's just like a phase.
I will say though, what's really helpful, because in my situation, like, I have a label, I have a label holding me accountable. So they're like, okay, here's the deadline. You have to do this. It needs to be done by this time because this is a business. So like, there's that. But even before I signed to Anjuna, when I did my own like self releases, I had to hold myself to the same standard, but with even more, where it's like I'm also doing the artwork and stuff and all that stuff by myself. But like when you hold yourself and you have friends that hold you accountable for these specific deadlines, then it forces you to be like, okay, like I'm going to put this song out. It's going out. Like I have to like allow myself the freedom of just letting it go and moving on to the next idea, because the more ideas that you decide, like you have to just decide it's done and let it go and move on. And if it flops, it flops, but like you have to keep going. There's you have to keep making more music, and the more you create, the less weight one specific idea will hold to you. And like it won't be like this thing where you're like, oh, this has to be the moment that like launches my career, or like the song that just cool it. But yeah, so I guess jumping back in, like I was saying, one great thing about these backing vocals is that you're good, is that they kind of help shift the weight of where the vocal is in the mix as well. So I'll just play it as an example, but. I'll sing them at like all my backing vocals will be at extremely different rhythms, and I'll try to sing them like in different pockets so that they meet up with the lead in interesting positions. And I think I do it more over here. Yeah. And I just stack them more and more. Here we go. There's another one over here that. The whole I treat it like a barbershop a cappella group, where like you want the vocals to kind of meet at certain points and lock in, and it's just very satisfying to me. So I spend a lot of time just like I'll stack And sometimes I'll sing the whole line and harmonize with the whole line, and you realize a lot of it, just because it harmonizes doesn't mean it sounds good. And then you chop out what doesn't sound good. And so you end up with these cool like fluctuations in the dynamic of your vocal that are really fun. Balancing a mix. No such thing. There's no such thing as balancing a mix. I'm kidding, kind of. It goes back to what Zeal and I've been saying about focal points, where you have to decide at any given point in a song what you want the listener's ear to be attracted to the most, and then everything else kind of takes the back seat. And that mentality is a lot easier because the rules apply differently to all genres. Like drum and bass, the snare always feels like it's the loudest thing. But and obviously the bass, but like with like house music, it's like usually the kick drum or the vocals. With pop music, it's always the vocals and the drums. So and I would argue that the balanced mix doesn't always sound great, just because it sounds like sometimes mixes can sound too clean, like too just put together. I don't know how to describe it, but it really just has to go off of a feeling, and a feeling of what you want to stand out the most at any given point. And that requires automation. That requires you to like, you can't just like set all your EQs one way, like add reverb at certain points of the song, add delays, add like filter things in and out from each other so they have dynamic throughout the song. And it's that in the long term, the more time you take to do that, the more complete mixes sound. I've noticed, like, if I do take the time to like just automate what takes the forefront, then you're fine. Everything's fine. And also just trying not to picking good samples in the first place, just getting good sounds. I can't stress that enough. Very like usually if the sound is good, you don't have to mix.
Yep.
Okay.
100%.
One last thing I have on the vocal just that's actually go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say just one brief thing to talk about as well when balancing a mix is just like to tie on to your point about a focal point. It's just like when you choose that element that you're making the center of attention, that you're making, you're kind of building the track around it. And then this kind of goes back to when we were talking about like the simplicity of tunes sounding so big and full, is when you choose that focal point or that area of attention, you want to sculpt everything around it. And then if each individual sound has its own space in the mix, it's really easy to pump that up even more. Yeah. Because things aren't fighting with each other. Because as soon as things start fighting with each other, you start to get like, that's when a mix becomes difficult to mix. Yeah. Right? It's because you're like, oh, why is this synth and this pad, like they seem to be clashing with each other. I can't seem to figure out like how to get them to sound right.
It's because two things literally aren't meant to fit in at once.
Eventually it's just making it worse.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like, yeah. So it's just like
one of the first things you can do is but besides volume is like side chaining, pushing things by millisecond to like milliseconds, like shifting them out of the way or deleting it altogether. Like the first thing you can do is literally just make sure things aren't hitting at the same time, or hitting in the same frequency, or hitting in the same pitch, or hitting in the same, like if they're panned left and right, like giving things literal space.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, so the last part of this vocal is actually a chop that I've been wanting to fit into so many songs. Don't ask me why, I just like it. But I think it gets really cool. I mean, I guess it's cool with the drop, but I like how it sounds with the builds. It just adds a little bit more texture, which is cool. We like textures. But there's not really much.
Vocal chops are so good.
They're fun. I typically don't do them.
Yeah, it's so fun.
But I usually just like try to sing out the parts that I imagine being chopped for the most part. But that's really all that's going on.
They work really well.
Go ahead.
they work super well with like the syncopation of like the drum and bass track, because you get so much rhythm from the drums, just having the chops in like almost out like almost like a hat layer. Like if you think about it in the
Yeah.
perspective of like a beat, like those chops almost fill this like mid-range like tom space, like a space where you might have like a tom or something, like say in a house song, but it's sped up and you get these vocal chops, and it kind of like gives
It's
you
right,
this
like right here.
illusion that it's a part of the beat. Yeah.
I was gonna say, hold on, we can just play it. I know exactly what you mean. Like,
Yeah.
it like helps like push the accent on the hi-hat, which is cool. I see what you're saying.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is like, I mean, I think what's cool with drum and bass that I'm starting to learn is that like you can have your synths mimic your percussive elements, or like having something else mimic your percussive elements to get it like to help push the groove even more. Yeah, sorry, I was looking at a question. Tim, I find myself trying to copy something all the time, and most of my songs that I do finish are me trying to copy something, and it's a failure, like because it's impossible. Most of the people I want to copy, it's impossible. Like even this song, like I said, is inspired by K Motions, and guess what? It does not sound like K Motions. Which is like it's not enough.
That's a really good question though, Tat.
Yeah,
it's
a
really
great
good
question
to ask. Though, it's like I would say pretty much every artist you can think of copies somebody else in a way. Like, and copying in like a form like is a form of flattery, because like you're obviously going to take your inspirations from other artists, like and then you kind of stick all of those like points you like about certain artists like together, and then you're like, wow, you sound like A, B, C, and D all mixed together. Like I've gotten that a lot for a lot of my music, and people are like, wow, you like sound like this person mixed with this person. It's like that's just kind of what it is. That's how you become your own artist, is like this like weird mix of like all the things that you enjoy about like other people's songs.
And you, like, I'd even argue that because people, this applies with visual art too, where people get mad, where it's like you learn from drawing other people's stuff. You learn to play guitar by playing other people's songs. You learn faster that way. It increases your learning potential like exponentially. It just makes you a faster learner if you can learn how people create a specific thing and how they go about it with the most minimal amount of resources possible. If you can do that, then when you start making your own ideas, they're just going to improve as you get more experience. So like what starts as copying, like the more you develop your skill, the more it just becomes an aspect of like, you don't look up a tutorial because you want to sound like this artist. You look up the tutorial so that you find out a specific technique that you can apply to your song. Like, you might look up like gated vocal chops, not because you want to sound like Bicep, but because you need gated vocal chops to to create like a rhythm in your song. But like, it's you
can hear it through your mic. It sounds rowdy.
Yeah, the storm has been pretty hefty. It's still raining really hard, but yeah. So speaking of the drums, though, we can get into that next. We used a kick you hooked up.
Yeah.
I remember in the original like demo that I cut up, it was probably a sample from Matt's drum kit from his sample pack on Splice.
I think it was, yeah.
I use his stuff all the time.
I do believe that's exactly what it was. Yeah, I can see it right here. Yeah, I can see the old part of the project file. It's definitely a kick from Matt.
It's from Matt. Yeah, it usually is. I'm sure the snare probably was too. Let's see what the snare was.
The snare was...
I do have the snare MIDI here. It's a mix of Haas. I have the... I want to say this is from an Organic House sample pack, this one. And then I have a Matt snare doing the little snap. And this, I guess this is like...
on here.
Yeah, I have these little guys. This is one thing that I've tried to do with this song that I'm trying to be better about is like, because I don't sound design drums. I'm like, that sounds insane. Like y'all are crazy. Like I'm good on that.
I don't even do that either.
Yeah, I'm good on that. But but the process of layering them where you you change, like when you drag a sample in, you're changing where the attack starts on each sample so that they sit differently, again going back to space, where like you don't have to mix if things are sitting where they need to. And that's kind of how I applied the same mentality with the snare. I can let the waves go by. I will say though, I feel like I probably would have added some more. I didn't do a lot of automation with space effects on the snare, and I feel like I would have done that. Like, there's not a lot going on with unless this isn't the final mix down project. Never mind. But still, I'm like, I feel like even just like in the production process, like just adding some more zhuzh. I feel like we both threw in on the there's Zeal loops here. There's Zeal top loops for sure.
Yeah.
There's
I have a couple like top loops that I like to go to that some of them I've built and some of them I've layered and some of them I found that just really fit in tracks. And I felt like that the hats on this one really needed like those like driving hats to like carry the song along. So it's like I remember definitely adding those. I can see them in my project file too here as well. And just kind of like they're just quick and what's the word I'm looking for?
They just sit nice. They're super tight.
Right now. Yeah, tight. That's the word. That's the word I'm looking for. Thank you.
They sit really high in the mix, so they're not competing with anything. For the most part.
Yeah.
Not even with the like actual the vocal, like even the vocals and the chords that are already existing, they're not even sitting in the same range as that. So again, not having to apply a lot of mixing in the first place because things sit in different places.
This track was like, this track, like in terms of like spacing and stuff, worked out really well.
Really
on,
well.
Like,
yeah.
The first couple attempts, like it was like almost like every element we added was exactly what it needed.
Yeah.
And that's just luck. Sometimes tracks just work like that, where you like the things you add just fit like right away.
Yeah.
Whereas like on the flip side,
happens.
I've had tracks I've been working on for like 3 or 4 years, and you're like, I cannot figure out this one part for the life of me.
No. And I think, like I said, the only thing that I feel like I would for real change about this song is like how I processed like my vocals and the bass, if anything. And like in that case, it's more so just like, because I want to add distortion to everything now. But other than that, like you're right, like usually things don't fit together this easily. Because honestly, like
very smooth.
Very smooth. The other little hat things we have going on, I want to say one is like a live hat. The storm.
Yeah, I think that's stuff you added in after.
Yeah, just to kind of help with the accents. It's just
These are there's some other hats that are. Yeah, I remember these.
I love doing hats, dude. Drum and bass hats. With house music, I don't have as much fun of a time, but with drum and bass, it's fun to kind of play around with where the hat is accenting. How many snares did you go through? Shut up. Don't even. Shut up. Shut up. Shut up. Just shut up. Shut up. I do
basically
need to,
Krug, imagine a list. Imagine a list longer than you can imagine, and then probably that many.
Imagine a list longer than you can fathom. Well, I guess, and I hear there's plenty of tutorials on this too, where it's like, hey dude, just pick your favorites, throw them in a rack, and have them saved so that when you're ready, like there's your go-to rack. And I'm like, yeah, sure. But then at the same time, I'm like, but then when I start a new song idea, it's never quite the same as like I just never start songs from the same place.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So something like that is
same.
It makes sense to do that, but I have a hard time doing that. I really do. But so
I feel very similarly with that point.
I
never really like save a lot of my stuff, like even like presets and patches and stuff that I've created, like drums. I've brought over like one drum loop to a couple tracks just because it fits a lot, but like like starting from the same point over and over, I feel can like almost inhibit a lot of your creativity because you're like already pigeonholed, like you're funneling yourself into like the same formula almost every time, which can totally work. There's
It
nothing
works
wrong
for
with
some
it.
people.
But
It
if you're
does
trying to like, yeah,
expand.
if you're
It's
really
just,
trying to like expand
yeah.
your,
So do we do?
so yeah,
Yeah.
I think O and I are very similar in that regard for sure.
Well, it's more so just from and not everyone thinks this way, because there's plenty of people like the organization. There's a reason for the organization, for the same reason that like I use a drone when I start a song. It's for limitations are important for a reason. But at the same time, when it comes to being able to show your dynamic range as an artist and just wanting to keep things interesting, it helps to start from a different place. And to be honest, like, it's something that happens to you naturally, where like even when you write a song that goes over really, really well with people, if you start to think, okay, I need to repeat that process, you will put yourself through a lot of emotional stress. So I just don't recommend doing that in the first place. I do want to answer this question about like panning drums. I typically put them, I treat it like a regular drum kit. Some people have a different opinion on this, but it's typically like you either pan them as if you are the drummer or as if you're facing the drummer, if that makes sense. So like,
yeah,
you like, for me, I'll like pan my snare just like a little bit to my left. My hi-hat's usually even farther than that. My cymbals are usually spread out pretty wide. Toms are spread out more to the right. I just treat it like a regular kit. And then from there, I'll use things like compression or reverb to make them feel farther away. But I try not to do it too much. Like, I try not to do like use effects like that too much individually. And I'll just like process the whole drum kit and put the whole drum kit in a room, if that makes sense. So yeah, it's mainly that. Drums are tricky, but I think one of my favorite things is using sends nowadays, like to give it the room. So moving forward, got another Matzo loop, cause his tops are great.
Oh, his whole
Well, the packs are great.
Packs like for drums and everything are fantastic.
Yeah,
Yeah,
make
they're
him
super
super
fantastic.
I should pan the kick all the way to the left. Is it Steely Dan that panned their entire drum kit like all the way to the left of like for a whole album? So yeah, very simple hi-hat. I don't know what this fill is doing. Just quiet. Da, 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 da. I have a crash that I reverse. I do this all the time. Once I find a crash, I just reverse it and use it as a sweep.
Yep.
Simple. And then if I need it to like have more space, I use a reverb and just crank it all the way up, delay all the way up, decay all the way up. And then as far as effects go, despite what we said earlier about like drum sounds, with effects, I use the same thing over and over again all the time, especially when it comes to like risers and transition sounds and sweeps. Once I find something I like, I typically just like, I have maybe 15 or 16 that I go to. Yeah. Just because I can't be bothered. I can't. When it comes to like that or like atmospheres, like I'm a little less like strict about like where it's coming from, where I'm like, okay, either if I find something I like, I'll like pitch it or something. But like with effects, I'm just really not trying to sweat myself. You feel me? I did do.
I think a lot of it has to come from just.
Go ahead.
I think a lot of it has to come from the tune itself. Like, if you have to add too many effects into the track, I guess obviously that's very dependent on what kind of tune you're making.
Yeah.
But I feel like if you have to go too deep into the effects, that you're trying to compensate for like the song itself almost. Yeah. So I agree with you. I don't usually go too crazy. You find like a white noise sweep and I'll just run that into the ground for like 15 songs.
Yeah. Like there's no need to like, I mean, I do have a couple, like I have this, there's a YouTube video that Mad Zach did about making your own laser effects. And so I have a rack like that lets you make your own like just absolutely insane sounds, and it's fun. But even then, I will just use that rack. It's not like I like try and do something insanely different each time.
That's kind of like I have a rack that's similar, not so much to making lasers, but it's like by this artist named Bass Clef, and he has this this rack that he made in Ableton called a washout, and it basically just like takes whatever sound and just like super reverb and super delay
just dubs
on
it out
like to the nines. Yeah, it just dubs it out completely, and it's really good for like when you have the impact on a one or you're trying to sweep up. It's just really nice, and that's like similar. I use that a lot on my stuff.
I did not think about doing that. I just realized that you could do like when something hits on the one, and then you can just like splash it out. And for some reason, like I always build it out before. I never thought like, why don't you? Okay, thank you. I'm stealing this meme. Thank you. But I guess one of the only noteworthy things that I did differently in this song that I normally don't do is adding sub drops in sections of songs. You might need headphones to hear it, but to kind of like, because whenever the songs like left the drop where there wasn't a lot of bass, or the bass just had a different voicing, the sub drop kind of helped with the transition of the song. But for the most part, the rest are just like very standard. Like I'm pretty sure this is a Laid Back Luke sample. Sweetis, and then there's like a Cashmere
sub drops
sweep.
are a big sub drops are a huge thing in drum and bass, actually. Like more often than not you hear like sub drops in a lot of songs, because it like dates back to like when jungle was like, you know, the prolific drum and bass genre, and they use sub drops like crazy. Like the middle of like their drops, they just like splash them all over the place. It was so cool.
I love it. I mean, I love how like its characteristic is so different in from like jungle to like now when it's used in like the most like big room vibe EDM, and it's like completely different. Like it serves the same purpose, but the vibe is completely different.
With a pretty snare behind it.
Yeah. Oh God. But speaking of basses, my fave. This we really had 7 basses on this thing, which is honestly not surprising. I did this with my last single too, where I'm like, why do I have 9 basses on this? What the fuck? Like who? What am I trying to prove? So, this first one, I can't show the actual plugin, but I use Monarch from Reactor all the time. I think it sounds fantastic. I do have a Behringer Model D, but I typically end up going to this Monarch plugin. And this is the preset Define Square. It's like the first patch on there, and then I'll just play with the literally the first patch that opens up. Sounds like this. It's just a sub. Oh, hold on. It doesn't open up. So that's just my sub. It's got a little bit of OTT on it, but if I'd change anything about that, I'd add erosion, which is what I did for my other songs on the subs to give it some crispy sizzle. Aside from that, I have this one bass that I couldn't decide whether or not I even wanted to keep, that has like this sound to it. Let me keep the drums. I'm going to keep the drums on while we show this as well. I feel like that's a good idea. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because I was trying to get that. Stupid. Okay. It's funny like going back and like seeing which like where things came in or why. This is an 808 that I desperately wanted to work, which I should have also added erosion to. To give it some more like it to come like kind of cut through the mix more. That kind of haunts me actually. Zeal pain.
Yeah, seriously. I love and hate like hearing songs back and just being like, I should have done this. It would have sounded so much better.
Yeah, for real. This one is a sample that like is super quiet. It's so quiet, but like, why did I mix these so quiet? That's another thing. When like the more time I'll spend on a mix down, the softer and softer and quieter I'll keep making things where I'm like, okay, if I mix quieter, then maybe my song will sound good. I don't know. That should have been cranked up, dude. Where are we at?
That's not a bad problem to have, though, because it's not a bad problem to have because it's better than like over mixing and making everything super loud that you then have to come back and like fix all this clipping and stuff. So like that is not a bad thing to have. That is not a bad problem.
This fog, my it's a sample, which I'm sorry. I should have just synthesized this, to be honest. That thick boy. And even with this, I feel like I probably would have added a decapitator to it. Like, just now that I have decapitator, I didn't have decapitator when I made the song, so I'd probably add it now. But yeah, that's. I mean, I'm sure it's just a splice sample where I just needed something. I knew I wanted something that ripped.
That sound does rip.
It does rip.
I think I just added a bit of OTT and stuff on it. I can see on my end here. I don't know if that changed in the project since, but like just like OTT is really nice for just like brightening up the high end, and you just have to be careful because you can definitely crisp it a little bit. It's really easy to like put it on a sound, and it's just like you can hear how crispy it is. And even I find myself sometimes like sending tunes to like peers, and they're being like, "Yo, too much OTT." I'm like, okay, I'll dial it back.
Because I mean, I think that's the tricky part about this style of music is saturation helps, like, because the whole thing is like, okay, you're basically just working with low end and you're trying to get that low end to punch through, and saturation and distortion are how you get it to cut, but it also takes away a lot of your low end, so you're like kind of having to do this like balancing act of compressing and saturating and like re-EQing and like adding back in the low end. It's really hard. It's just hard. it's really tricky work.
Yeah. That's where bass layering comes in very handy too. Like I find myself a lot when I try to like really like roast and get the top end like really crispy, is like Lou said, she the bass starts to fade away. Like your low end starts to fade away when that happens. So it's nice to like almost separate those frequencies out and put them in their own individual tracks. So you're almost doing like parallel compression with all the sounds after, rather than just trying to like fix one thing. It's easy to just like take the low end from that sound and just stick it in its own area. Don't touch it, leave it, and then you can mess with everything else and then just EQ out the section that you don't want. And then you've got the low end, like the sub bass, like just sitting there and it's untouched. It's nice and clean, which is kind of what this song is. It's just like very, very, like we have the sub bass stripped out from the actual bass noise. So you're only getting this like mid kind of sound to it that's giving it like the oomph, but then the sub bass is the part that's really carrying the weight of the sound.
Yeah. Like, again, giving everything having its own specific space in the mix rather than trying to accommodate like, I don't know, just
exactly
it with bass sounds. I've learned that splitting your signal is one of the like best things you can do for the tone itself, and like processing it differently, where like, not that you can't saturate your sub or anything, but just like when you, like you said, when you're able to like leave it alone and let it be, and then like layer on the sounds to do the transients that you actually want, the mix of that sounds a lot more fulfilling than if I just tried to like make one synth have like 8 different voices at once trying to like it's just hard. It's just really hard. What sound is this?
When they start fighting with each other, they'll start fighting with each other, and that makes your mix just more difficult.
Girls fight.
The more you try and figure that out and unlock it, it gets more difficult. It's like the more you add to the puzzle box, the more it becomes a puzzle box. Like that's harder to open. So
yeah, this
my weird metaphors.
I'm starting to remember where this sample came from. It's a breakbeat bass sample, or like a big beat sample pack that I found, and this was like a bass tone that came from it, and I threw it in. I do this all the time where I'll throw it into Ableton's sampler and use slice mode and just like try and riff like that. So it's just turn on all these boys. Turn on all the kids. I keep having to remind myself this isn't the final mixdown project.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to make sure I had some of the MIDI to show like where it's ow 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 ow. I just like kicked the mic into my mouth.
Shit.
Yeah.
Oh, you good?
No, we're fine. But like, I just lost my train of thought. I guess one thing that I'm having to remind myself is that this mix, like, even though it was hard to like, it was just hard to keep getting the basses to act right in this sense, because I was trying to, I was like trying to do something really rhythmic, but they were all competing for the same frequencies.
Yeah.
I really just kicked a mic into my mouth. That was amazing. This last bass I have is just like it's like a verbed out. All the frequencies are taken out, almost like a horn. Cute. Easy enough. And then this last one, oh my God. Oh, I remember that. I don't think we ended up keeping this. I wanted that to work so bad, but I don't think we kept it because it like wasn't really in key with the rest of the basses.
Yeah, we didn't keep that for sure.
We didn't keep it. I really wanted to. But that's pretty much it.
It's a pretty straightforward track.
It's a really straightforward song.
Yeah.
And yeah, like, aside from that, there's no sends going on. I didn't really not, at least not in this, because like I said, this isn't the mix down. But like for the most part, the only changes I'd make are maybe do some more, just be more creative with the sends on the vocal and saturate the basses more, and maybe even pan the basses more.
Yeah.
But still, like, I think it's exciting just because like lyrically this song was the most tied to the game that inspired the album. Besides Wake and Return, I was like, this song is like a straight up rip of like from specific scenarios in the game that I can't, like, I don't want to go into because I don't want to do like spoilers, but just like came from a place of where I'm like, yeah, like I'm sure if people like were a fan of Outer Wilds, they'd be like, dude, like come up with something new, come on. Because it's like straight up like just concepts from parts of the game that like really inspired me a lot, or like just, you know, related to how I was feeling at the time. But yeah, it's cool. It's cool because I haven't put out a drum and bass tune that didn't involve Matt like spearheading production, so I was nervous, but I mean, we're here. We did it. It's out.
Killer job.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah,
it was fun. It was fun to put together, and it sits with the album in a really cool way and helps kind of carry the tail end in a way where it's like I don't know. It just ties the overall messaging together in context with the rest of the album, and in a way that without it, like,
yeah.
I don't know, the sense of, let me stop talking. I'm like over here trying to be all deep, and I'm like, let me just shut up and let people listen to the album later.
The album is amazing, so you all better be ready.
I cries, just freaks out. It'll be fine. But we have like less than 2 weeks now. Less than 2 weeks, I think. So that's exciting.
What's the date that it comes out?
June 10th.
June 10th?
Yeah, Gemini season. My teeth taste like Mike.
Before, so.
You what?
My birthday's 4 days before the release. So.
Oh, let's go. So we party. But yeah, so
yeah, we party.
Zeal, I appreciate you for taking the time to break this song down with me, and I appreciate everyone for tuning in again. I'll be back in. I'm I'm trying to think if the next time that I'll be back on this channel, will the album be out yet? Or it'll be like the week that, I don't know. I'm not going to worry about it. But the point is I'll see you guys very soon. Yes, album out is June 10th. Yeah, dude, anytime. We should probably, it'd be nice to do an actual like mix or something. I don't know. I've seen people try to do like back-to-back DJ mixes on stream, and I'm like, y'all are crazy. Or like they do it from separate rooms, and I'm like, I don't know.
We can figure something out. Maybe I just got to come down and visit. We got to do it IRL or something.
Or that, yeah, you could come to the South. You could come to Georgia.
Yeah.
But yeah,
that'd be vibes.
That would be fun. Yeah, pull up. Hopefully, it won't be raining as hard as it is now.
True.
The only show I got going on is June 3rd in Miami with Dave Dresden. We're playing in like a 9. You want to talk about a 9-to-5 job? That Dave Dresden is a 9-to-5 job. We're literally playing from 9 to 5 in the morning. Insanity. But yeah, so that'll be fun.
That's amazing.
I'll keep you guys posted on some news on a one-of-a-kind Contra boombox that my buddy Kyle is working on, and a run of cassettes that we're working on. We're working on cassettes. So lots of fun stuff. I'll keep you guys in the loop. Follow Zeal at Origin Zeal. It's at Origin Zeal is your handle, right?
It's at one of those weird. Yeah, it's one of those weird handles. I just want it to be unique when I started out. Now it's just a problem for everybody.
Origin Zeal. I just got a flash flood warning on my phone. So on that note,
oh gosh,
we're fine. Everything's fine. Everyone just stay cool. On that note, thank you guys for tuning in. I'll see you in 2 weeks. Stay or if not at the show in Miami. Be safe, be well.